Hello, everyone. Welcome back to today's story. In this episode, the new house of James and Diep comes alive with warmth and laughter because Mrs. Huyen, James's mother, has decided to host a trial wedding for the couple. As Diep walks down the garden aisle, holding Nee's tiny hand, her heart overflows with joy and gratitude toward the woman who once doubted her. But beyond the laughter and blessings, this celebration carries a deeper meaning. It's Mrs. Huyen's way of accepting Diep as her true daughter-in-law. Stay tuned until the end to see how this heartwarming trial wedding turns into something truly unforgettable. And don't forget to subscribe to help us reach 10,000 subscribers. Your support means the world to us. Morning light filters softly through the curtains of the new house, glinting off freshly polished tiles. The air smells faintly of jasmine and excitement. Outside, a gentle breeze sways the red ribbons tied to the gate, a hint of the celebration that's about to unfold. Inside, Mrs. Huyen moves briskly from room to room, her hands full of decorations. "James, hang this lantern a little higher," she calls out, her tone half command, half affection. James, smiling patiently, obeys, balancing on a small ladder as he adjusts the golden ornament. The house, though newly built, already feels alive. Laughter echoes off the walls, and the scent of roasted chicken drifts in from the kitchen. In the middle of it all, Diep stands frozen for a moment, her eyes wide in disbelief. What is all this?" she asks softly, voice trembling between surprise and emotion. Mrs. Huyen turns, her face lighting up with a proud smile. "This, my dear, is your wedding. Well, your trial wedding," she says, chuckling. "Before the real one, I wanted to make sure everything looks perfect." Diep blinks, stunned. "A trial wedding? You mean—" "Yes," Huyen interrupts, adjusting a garland of roses on the wall. "We'll treat it as a rehearsal, but I want it to feel real. Flowers, food, blessings, everything. After all, this house needs its first celebration, doesn't it?" Diep's lips part in astonishment, her heart pounding as she glances toward James. He's standing by the doorway, arms crossed, smiling at her with that calm, reassuring expression that always melts her worries. "Mom insisted," he says lightly, walking over. "She said we can't move into a new house without good luck. And what's luckier than a wedding?" Diep laughs softly, shaking her head. "You both planned this behind my back?" "Of course," Huyen says, her tone teasing. "You've been so busy with the company, I thought you deserved a surprise." As the realization settles in, Diep looks around. The room draped in pink and white, the chairs lined neatly with satin covers, the aroma of rice wine filling the air. For the first time in weeks, she feels something she's forgotten how to feel. Joy, unburdened by worry. Nee comes running in, wearing a tiny white dress, ribbons in her hair. "Mommy, Grandma says I'm the flower girl," she squeals, holding a small basket of petals. Her excitement is contagious, and Diep kneels, smoothing the child's hair. "You look beautiful, sweetheart." James watches them with quiet affection, his gaze soft. Huyen stands by the doorway, hands on her hips, pride shining in her eyes. "Look at my family," she murmurs, "so beautiful together." Moments later, the sound of a guitar drifts through the air, gentle, romantic. The hired musicians dressed neatly, start tuning their instruments. The entire house buzzes with activity as neighbors peek through the open windows, whispering excitedly. Diep blushes when one of the decorators hands her a simple bouquet. "Hold this," the woman says cheerfully. "You're the bride today, aren't you?" "The pretend bride," Diep corrects, smiling shyly, but inside, her heart beats with a strange, tender rhythm. Pretend or not, the moment feels real. The ceremony begins in the garden. The sun filters through the canopy of mango trees, scattering golden light over the white chairs arranged in rows. James stands at the front, dressed in a crisp suit. Diep walks toward him, holding Nye's tiny hand, the soft sound of petals brushing under their feet. For a brief moment, the world seems to slow. James looks at her, not as if this were a trial, but as if it were the day. His eyes are full of warmth and unspoken promise. Diep's heart swells. She feels every beat echoing in her chest, the joy of this moment wrapping around her like sunlight. When they reach the small altar, Huyen steps forward, beaming. "I now pronounce you, well, almost married," she jokes, making everyone laugh. "We'll call this rehearsal a blessing." Laughter ripples through the guests, and Huyen continues, her tone softening. "In my life, I've seen many houses, many weddings. But what truly makes a home is not the walls. It's love, patience, and family. Today, I see all three right here." Diep blinks rapidly, tears glimmering in her eyes. Huyen gently places her hand over Diep's. "You've worked so hard, my dear. You deserve happiness." The applause that follows is heartfelt. James wraps an arm around Diep, whispering, "See, you already passed the test." After the ceremony, the air fills with the aroma of food: roasted pork, jasmine rice, and steamed fish. Tables are laid out under strings of lanterns. The wedding guests, mostly close friends and workers from the construction site, raise their glasses. "To the couple," someone cheers. "To a future full of laughter," another adds. Huyen laughs heartily, pouring tea for Diep. "You know," she says, eyes gleaming, "when James first told me about you, I wasn't sure. But seeing the way you look at him and how you care for Nye, I understand now. You're the right one." Diep smiles, speechless for a moment. "Thank you, Mother. That means everything to me." As the night deepens, the music softens. James and Diep sit side by side under the glowing paper lanterns. Nye dances clumsily in front of them, her laughter echoing like tiny bells. "Did you ever imagine this?" James asks quietly. Diep shakes her head, her gaze distant but warm. "Not even in my dreams. I thought happiness like this was for other people." James reaches over, taking her hand. "Then maybe it's time you believe it's yours too." The silence that follows isn't empty. It's full, brimming with the sound of crickets, laughter, and soft music from the house. Diep glances toward the garden gate, where Huyen stands watching them with satisfaction. The older woman wipes her eyes discreetly, whispering to herself, "Yes, this is how a family begins." In that moment, Diep realizes something profound. The trial wedding isn't just for show. It's a symbol of acceptance, a gentle way for Huyen to open her heart fully to her. She breathes in the night air, feeling the weight of the past months, the illness, the exhaustion, the endless work, fade away. For tonight, there are no worries, no pressure, only light, laughter, and love. The new house glows warmly behind them, filled with chatter and music. It's no longer just a building. It's their first true home, baptized by joy. As the last of the guests leave, Huyen walks over, handing Diep a small box. "Open it when you're alone," she says softly. Inside, later that night, Diep finds a pair of gold rings and a handwritten note for when the real day comes, and it will soon. She presses the note to her chest, tears falling silently, her heart full to the brim. The moonlight spills through the window, touching her face gently. And for the first time, Diep allows herself to believe this love, this family, this life, it's truly hers. The next morning, the scent of fresh flowers still lingers in the air. Sunlight streams through the living room, dancing on the ribbons and scattered petals from last night's celebration. Diep wakes early, her body tired, but her heart light. She steps quietly into the kitchen and finds Mrs. Huyen already there, stirring a pot of porridge. "Morning, Mom," Diep greets softly. Huyen turns, smiling with warmth that feels newly gentle. "Good morning, my bride," she teases, and both laugh. Diep blushes, glancing at the dishes lined up neatly on the counter. "You're up early." "Old habits," Huyen replies, ladling porridge into bowls. "And besides, I wanted to make breakfast for my new daughter-in-law." It feels good to say that. Diep's throat tightens. The word daughter-in-law still feels like a dream. "Thank you," she whispers. "Last night was more beautiful than anything I could imagine." Huyen chuckles, waving her hand. "Oh, that was just a small rehearsal. The real wedding will be grander. We'll have flowers from Dalat, musicians from the city." "Mom," Diep interrupts gently, smiling. "You don't need to go that far. I'm already so happy." Huyen tilts her head, studying her. "You're humble. That's what I like about you. But I want the world to know how much James loves you, and how much I've come to love you too." The words land softly, but deeply. Diep nods, touched beyond words. Just then, Nee stumbles in, rubbing her sleepy eyes. "Mommy." "I had a dream," she mumbles. Diep kneels to her level. "Oh? What did you dream about, sweetheart?" Nye beams. "You and Uncle James got married, and Grandma danced with me. We had cake and balloons and—" Diep laughs, lifting the girl into her arms. "That wasn't a dream, Nye. That really happened last night." "Really?" Nye gasps, eyes wide. "Then I want another wedding today." Huyen laughs so hard she nearly drops her spoon. "Oh, don't tempt me, little one. I'll actually do it." The kitchen bursts into laughter, a symphony of warmth and belonging. Later that morning, James returns from the market, carrying baskets of vegetables and flowers. "Someone had to restock after last night's feast," he says with a grin. Diep moves to help him unpack. "You didn't have to go so early." "I wanted to," he says, handing her a bunch of roses. "For you." She takes them, smiling shyly. "You're making it hard to believe last night was just a rehearsal." James chuckles, brushing a petal from her hair. "Who says it was just a rehearsal? For me, it was real." The way he says it, soft, certain, makes her heart tremble. But before she can respond, Huyen's voice cuts in, playful yet firm. "All right, lovebirds, enough romance. We've got guests dropping by to congratulate you two. Guests? Diep repeats, startled. Yes, Huyen says, grinning. Word travels fast in this neighborhood. They all want to see the bride and groom. Within an hour, the front yard fills with neighbors carrying small gifts, fruits, flowers, even homemade cakes. Diep greets each person with gratitude, her polite smile masking the shy flutter in her chest. Mrs. Huyen, your daughter-in-law is beautiful, one neighbor exclaims. Such elegance. Huyen beams. Of course she is. She's also smart, hardworking, and respectful. I couldn't ask for better. Diep feels her cheeks flush. Each compliment feels surreal, especially coming from the woman who once doubted her. As the guests chatter, one of them, an old family friend, leans close to Huyen and whispers, "You're lucky. James finally found someone who truly fits him. I remember when you used to worry no one would understand your son." Huyen nods thoughtfully, her gaze lingering on Diep and James as they serve tea together. "Yes," she murmurs. "She's the one I prayed for." After lunch, the guests leave, and the house falls quiet again. The decorations still hang gently from the beams, shimmering under the afternoon sun. Diep stands by the window, lost in thought. James approaches, slipping an arm around her waist. "You've been quiet," he says softly. She exhales slowly. "I'm just overwhelmed. Yesterday felt like a dream. I keep wondering when it will all fade." James turns her gently to face him. "It won't fade," he says firmly, "because we'll keep making new memories. One's even better than yesterday." Their eyes meet, and the silence between them feels sacred. Then Huyen's voice echoes from the kitchen again, breaking the moment. "James, Diep, come here for a second." They walk in to find Huyen setting down a wooden box on the counter. She opens it carefully, revealing stacks of crisp red envelopes. "Mom, what's this?" James asks, surprised. "These," Huyen says proudly, "are blessings from everyone who came last night. You'd be shocked how generous they were. I guess everyone loves a good love story." Diep stares at the envelopes, her voice trembling. "We can't accept this." "Nonsense," Huyen interrupts. "It's tradition. You'll use it to furnish the new house. A sofa, maybe curtains for the bedroom. Consider it a gift from all of us." Tears well in Diep's eyes. "Mom, I don't know what to say." "Just promise me one thing," Huyen says, her tone turning soft. "Promise me you'll take care of each other. That's all I ask." Diep nods quickly, her heart swelling with gratitude. "I promise." That evening, the three of them, Huyen, James, and Diep, sit outside in the courtyard. The sun dips below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and gold. Nai skips around them, holding the same basket of petals she used last night. "Let's do it again," she cries, tossing petals into the air. The petals flutter down, glowing under the last rays of sunlight. Huyen laughs. "See? Even the child doesn't want the celebration to end." James leans back, watching Diep's hair shimmer in the fading light. "You know," he says quietly, "Mom might have called it a trial wedding, but to me, this was perfect." Diep looks at him, eyes soft. "Perfect doesn't mean easy. We still have so much ahead. Work, the business, my health." "I know," he interrupts, squeezing her hand. "But whatever comes, we'll face it together." The wind carries the faint sound of music from a distant house, someone playing the same melody as last night. It drifts through the air, tender and nostalgic. Diep closes her eyes, letting the moment sink in. For the first time in a long while, the weight of fear doesn't suffocate her. Instead, she feels surrounded by love, by family, by hope. She opens her eyes to find Huyen watching her with a proud smile. "You've brought so much light into this home, Diep," the older woman says softly. "I can finally rest easy knowing my son is happy." "Thank you, Mom," Diep replies, voice trembling. "You've given me a family. I'll never forget that." The three of them sit there for a long time, watching the stars appear one by one. The laughter, the warmth, the quiet understanding. It all blends into a single memory, the kind that stays forever. As night deepens, James pulls Diep close, whispering, "When the real wedding comes, we won't need to rehearse. We'll just keep doing what we did last night. Love each other, no matter what." Diep smiles through her tears. "Then I guess we're already married in our hearts." Above them, the lanterns sway gently in the evening breeze. The house, their house, glows softly behind them, alive with light and promise.